This is FBC's Night Wrap. Reporting from Washington is Ted Connor.
Victoria Brooker is a star Little League pitcher, the only girl on a team that made it to this year's Little League World Series. But a new bill in Congress says that if she wants to play on her school team, she won't be allowed to go to bat with the boys. Hello, I'm Ted Connor, and this is Night Wrap. Here in Washington, a Senate committee will begin hearings tomorrow on a bill that has already passed the House. The bill will provide money to, quote, promote excellence and equal opportunity in intermediate and secondary school athletics. It would give $250 million to public schools for additional sports equipment, athletic facilities, and coaching staff for the nation's boys and girls. Sounds great, but there's a catch. Although the money is to be distributed equally, the teams the kids play on must be segregated by sex. A girl can't play on a boys' team, and a boy can't play on a girls'. Well, that's made a lot of people angry, and they're mounting a full-court press to get this legislation defeated. Here with some background is correspondent Maria Torres. Maria?
Ted, the idea for this legislation came to Representative Max Farkas of Iowa during the last Olympic Games.
I watched our Olympic team competing with the Soviets and the East Germans. And I thought it was a crying shame that our nation's champions don't get as much money and training as other countries' athletes do. So after a lot of thought and some hard work from my staff, we came up with a bill that would give extra money to schools to train our Olympic stars of tomorrow.
Separate but equal in reality means separate and inferior.
Miss Hawkins, it seems to me you're comparing apples and oranges. The provisions of this bill are hardly the same thing as racial discrimination.
It doesn't matter whether we're talking about blacks and whites, men and women, or boys and girls. Keeping people separate from other people means treating them like second-class citizens. If this bill passes, it will mean a major step backwards after 3 decades of progress in women's rights.
One of the most effective witnesses against the bill was 14-year-old Sarita Gary, a soccer player from Congressman Farkas's home district in Iowa.
I believe that girls can play as many sports as boys, just as good as boys. In some ways, we're even better. Maybe I'm not as strong as the next boy, but that doesn't mean I can't do my job. I've played football, basketball, and soccer all of my life. Not all girls want to play on boys' teams, but the government shouldn't stop the ones that do.
Didn't you find it difficult competing with boys?
No, I didn't find it difficult. I can run just as fast as a boy and jump just as high. Some girls who aren't on teams are better than the boys who are.
On the House floor, there was strong support for the legislation.
I am in full agreement with my respected colleague from Iowa and proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. The extra funds will do a world of good. The separation of girls' and boys' teams is both right and fair.
Expect some real fireworks at the Senate hearings. Both sides have lined up impressive rosters of witnesses, all ready to play the game of politics, the most popular sport in Washington. Ted?
Maria, is support for or against this bill breaking down along the Republican and Democratic party lines?
Ted, there are so many issues involved here. Discrimination, equal opportunity, whether or not we're wasting money that could be better used elsewhere. Party leaders can't get a handle on it. There's no consistent voting pattern by party or region or even gender. That's very unusual.
Maria, thank you. With us in Washington is Senator Jane Minskell, Democrat from Texas, and at our studio in Baltimore, Senator Roscoe Crockett, Republican from Maryland. They are on opposite sides of this issue. Senator Minskell, let's start with you. Why are you opposed to this so-called Excellence and Equal Opportunity Act?
Well, Ted, for starters, it violates Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972.
You were a prime mover behind Title IX, were you not?
Yes, I was. That was my first term in the Senate.
Could you explain a little bit about it to us?
Oh, certainly. Title IX is a law that was passed by Congress in 1972 that says it's illegal for schools to sexually discriminate. Now that covers admissions, scholarships, certainly athletics, just everything.
Those in favor of this bill argue that it completely agrees with Title IX. Title IX guarantees equal opportunity. This bill would provide for equal funding. Doesn't equal funding mean equal opportunity?
Well, you know, girls' teams have always been ignored and underfunded. It's hard to turn down any kind of money, but that is really, to me, beside the point. The point is that this bill is saying to institutions that it is okay to sexually discriminate, and of course it is not okay to sexually discriminate.
Senator Crockett from Maryland.
Ted, as my esteemed colleague from Texas knows, I have the utmost respect for women's sports. But that's just it, women's sports. We should not only separate the men from the boys, we should separate the boys from the girls. That's the way they do it in Olympic competition, and it's the way we should do it in the schools.
But it's been established in this country that separate but equal is wrong. Why is this different?
We know that the color of a person's skin is irrelevant. It was wrong to keep blacks and whites in separate schools. But we also know that girls aren't strong enough to play on men's teams. They bring down the level of competition. That's why it's different.
You know, women play baseball.
Women play softball.
Oh, tell that to Victoria Brucker at the Little League World Series. And what about that wonderful young woman in New Jersey who's a place kicker for her high school football team? Now, you know, if this bill were enacted, she wouldn't even be allowed to be on the field. You'd not only be cheating her, but her teammates and the fans.
Senator, whose side are you on? You're opposing a bill that would increase funding for women's sports.
I'm opposing a bill that wastes money by creating duplicate teams.
Senators, clearly you're going to have to agree to disagree. Maria Torres has a new development in this story. Maria?
Yes, Ted. The Associated Press reports that a group of senators, led by Thorne Smith of Oregon, are in favor of an amended version of this bill. They believe that whether boys and girls play together is not something that should be determined by the federal government. Therefore, they will propose amending the bill to remove the gender restrictions, give each school the money, and let them decide for themselves whether or not they'll keep the boys and girls apart.
Very interesting. Senator Minskell, what do you think of that?
It still allows a school to discriminate if it so chooses. I'd have to say I'd oppose it, just as I oppose the bill as currently written. If either version passes the Senate, I hope the President will have the wisdom to veto it.
Senator Crockett?
I'm convinced the bill will pass as is. This legislation will be a boon and a blessing to our nation's athletes.
Maria, you've been following this story very closely. In the few remaining seconds, what do you think will happen?
Well, if an amended version of this bill is passed, it will have to go to a joint Senate and House Conference Committee to work out a version that both chambers are happy with. In any case, the President is a well-known sports fan, and my feelings are that if the bill passes in any form, he'll sign it into law.
Maria Torres, I want to thank you, as well as our guests, and I'd like to remind our viewers that tomorrow's program will be delayed by live coverage of the Senate Committee on Labor and Human Resources hearings on this very important piece of legislation, S-1789, the Excellence and Equal Opportunity Act. For FBC News, I'm Ted Connor. Good night.